Welcome to Future Histories. My name is Jan Groß, and it is my great pleasure to welcome Antoinette Rovroy in today's episode. It's a Future Histories live episode that you are about to hear, meaning it has been recorded in front of an audience, in this case, in the context of the workshop Biological Life and Political Cybernetics that took place in December 22 in Vienna. And I want to thank the organizers Anna Verena Nosthoff, Eugenia Stamboliev, and Vesel Reyes for the possibility to take part in this. It has been great. Thanks a lot. And I am happy to announce that this is not a single workshop, but a series of workshops on the topic of political cybernetics, and that I myself will organize an instance of this series at Kiel University as part of the research project Governing Algorithms. I'll definitely keep you updated on that. I also want to send a quick shout out to the Critical Data Lab, which I'm also affiliated to and which was, through Anna Verena Nosthoff, also involved in the organization of the Political Cybernetics workshop in Vienna. Many thanks to everybody involved in general. It has been a pleasure. Before we start, I would like to welcome Manchu and Dalia as patrons of Future Histories, and I want to thank Fabian, Lucas, and Karl for their kind donations. And now, please enjoy today's episode with Antoinette Rovroy on algorithmic governmentality. Welcome to Future Histories. My name is Jan Groß, and it is my great pleasure to welcome Antoinette Rovroy in today's episode. She is a permanent research associate at the Belgian National Fund for Scientific Research and a researcher and professor at the University of Namur in Belgium. Her work centers around evolving normativities at the interface of legal theory, philosophy, and science and technology studies. Using Foucault's insights on questions of government, she has developed an analytic framework called algorithmic governmentality, which we will explore in today's conversation. Welcome, Antoinette.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. Let's maybe start with a broad definition for people who are not familiar with your work. What is algorithmic governmentality?
Well, I must first say that my intention with that concept or that notion or that non-concept rather of algorithmic governmentality has never been to find the right epochal ladder for something like a social totality. If I speak of governmentality, it is precisely in order to avoid delimiting the social as a totality. I don't speak of algorithmic society any more than of a surveillance society. Algorithmic governmentality does not, in the sense I use the term, designate a particular mode of government which would have more or less replaced or been juxtaposed to the forms of sovereignty, pastorate, discipline, normalization, control, and so on, that Foucault, and in fact, Foucault himself did not consider that sovereignty, surveillance, discipline, control, and so on corresponded to a strict chronologic periodization. It was not for him a series in which the elements follow one another. It is rather a complex edifice in which the center of gravity shifts in the systems of correlations between legality, discipline, security, control, and I would add with Félix Guattari, integration, and I would add with a lot of you, with most of you, recursivity. These shift at the core of governmental rationalities. The way I try to inherit of the non-concept of governmentality from Foucault is, I must concede right away, quite unfaithful, at least partially, to the original meaning ascribed to the term by Michel Foucault in the series of lectures he held at the Collège de France in 1978 and 1973. And I would say that because since I wrote about algorithmic governmentality first, it was a long time ago, my own thinking has evolved, and I have come to understand that, in fact, algorithmic governmentality or algorithmic capitalism was not a mode of ordering of the world. It is not a mode of organization, but it's rather a tactic or a system of disorganization, of organized and strategic disruption, which is highly profitable to the ones who Mackenzie Ward call the vectorialist class. But of course, we are all part of this, and I will try to develop that a little bit later. So I refer to also, I must say right away that I refer to governmentality mainly as a methodological perspective that orients our attention away from the classical invariants of political science, the state, institutions, the subjects. From a governmentality perspective, the state, institutions, the subjects are not presupposed or pre-existent to governmentality. They are rather its byproducts. So governmentality allows me to try to diagnose or to produce a kind of clinics or analytics of a series of semiotic, epistemic, normative, strategic, anthropological, ethical shifts in the processes or techniques of signification, that is production of meaning, in techniques of power or domination, and in techniques of the self. Foucault's notion of governmentality, or what he calls governmental rationality, which corresponds in this sense to what, for example, Castoriadis calls the imaginary institution of society, is above all, for me, a way of making consistent, of articulating, of showing the entanglement in each era of a set of techniques of signification, meaning making, techniques of production, techniques of power, and techniques of self. This being said, what I have as a target are indeed the new effects of reliability or credit without truth in the post-truth era where we are, as is often said. The unprecedented effects of power or operationality without authority, and therefore responsibility, or the force without law, and an individualization or molecularization and deterritorialization without subjects. Therefore, I speak with others of inhuman biopolitics, the instrumental unit of power being not anymore the population, individuals, or the bodies, but only meaningless data. So this being said about governmentality, now, why algorithmic governmentality? By algorithmic governmentality, with my colleague Thomas Berns, we had in mind a kind of hypothesis, an hypothesis of a government of the social world based on the algorithmic, meaning automatic processing of the massive data proliferating from our behaviors. By behaviors, I understand all the interactions we have with the environment, relationships, interactions, trajectories, and so on. So processing of massive data proliferating from our behaviors rather than on politics, law, social norms in a multitude of sectors of activity and government. We therefore call algorithmic government or algorithmic governmentality a mode of government which is productive not of norms, neither of standards or rules, which in fact fails to adjudicate, and which is fed essentially by raw data, by which I mean infrapersonal and significant but quantifiable signals. Also, algorithmic governmentality operates by anticipatory configurations of possibilities through anticipatory optimization of environments, rather than by regulation, permission, prohibition, and so on. But as I will tell, no, my current thought about it is rather that, in fact, it's not even trying to govern anything. It's rather trying to render power absolutely agile, able to be resilient to any kind of transformation, any kind of emergence. So that's really the speculative turn that algorithmic governmentality marks. So we have also defined in some of our papers algorithmic governmentality very broadly as a certain type of anormative or apolitical rationality founded or grounded on the automated collection, aggregation, and analysis of big data so as to model, anticipate, and preemptively affect possible behaviors. So, of course, when reading and rereading Foucault and Deleuze, I realized it was not very, very original. In fact, already in 1979, Foucault announced this. On the horizon of liberal governmentality, what appears is not at all the ideal or the project of an exhaustively disciplinary society in which the legal network enclosing individuals would be relayed and extended from within by, let us say, normative mechanisms, nor is it a society in which the mechanisms of general normalization and exclusion of the non-normalizable would be required. On the contrary, on the horizon is the image or the idea or theme of a society in which there would be optimization of systems of difference, in which the field would be left open to auxiliary processes, in which there would be tolerance for minority individuals and practices, in which there would be action not on the players of the game, but on the rules of the game. And finally, in which there would be intervention, not on the type of internal subjugation of individuals, but intervention of an environmental type. And in the next lesson, Foucault reminded of the heterodox definition of economics given by Gary Becker, the science of systematicity of responses to environmental variations, a definition, Foucault told us, which can perfectly include the behavioral techniques that had been promoted in particular by Skinner, about whom Foucault also writes that he was hostile to the use of statistics, that he considers that individual behaviors must be studied, which presupposes that we control the environment in which we place the subject and that we define measures of response which are informative. When a subject moves in his environment, some of his behaviors produce detectable changes in the environment, the reinforcement contingencies. The operant response is a class of responses defined by the consequences they have for the subject and issued in a given situation without being causally dependent on a stimulus in the situation. That's really the kind of data behaviorism that I have tried to describe, in which, in fact, insights replace knowledge. And in fact, it completely disturbs that the idea that Foucault had, in fact, power is always based and co-produced with knowledge. Here, the conjunction of knowledge and power is completely exploded. There is no need for knowledge to govern, and it's even the opposite. It's a way through which contingency and non-knowledge and ignorance become the target, or the target of speculative and leveraging strategies. So we are not exactly in the situation described by Foucault. Why? Of course, we perceive all that modulation that we have left modernist way of government and so on. But I would say we are even further than what he anticipated in 1979. Why is it? Because in fact, there is no action on the rules of the game, or if there are actions on the rules of the game, these rules are not even anymore detectable or subjectively recognizable by the players. Why is that? Because in algorithmic governmentality, what we notice is that even metrics against which behaviors or performances are evaluated, ranked, scored, and so on, metrics have become increasingly plastic. They are not fixed. They are not knowable in advance. They are moving and evolving according to the behaviors of all others. What that means is that we are not anymore confronted with the kind of subject produced by algorithmic governmentality is completely at odds with the notion of the Homo economicus described by Gary Becker, the Homo economicus who had to invest rationally in his own human capital by being able to anticipate what kind of returns his investment would grant him. No, people never know how they will be evaluated, and the metrics are so moving that, in fact, one can have the impression that this shift from modernist normativity towards recursive plasticity of anormativity, of that cybernetic mode of government, it can appear really emancipatory, but it is paid. It is at the cost of transforming individuals into people who are completely addicted to credit. So they have to find credit to gain attention, to gain audience, to be noticed. It means to occupy a node in the network. So, in fact, it's a kind of anomy. That's the reason why in beginning, to respond too long to your question, I said it's a system of disorganization. It's a system of disorganization because it fragments all subjectively and collectively recognizable forms into pure decontextualized signals, which are reaggregated at an industrial scale, which is not personal nor collective nor nothing, which are pure speculative, in which pure speculative spaces are created, speculative spaces of opportunities and risks. I have the impression that I have transformed this discussion into a monologue, so don't hesitate to interrupt me if you wish.
Well, I'll just wait until you have finished making your point, so that's all right with me.
Okay. So I maybe in order to give some consistency, some materiality to what I'm saying here, I give just a few examples. For example, there is a new system of employee monitoring developed by Amazon in its warehouse and in the vehicle of their delivery drivers. In the online presentation, Amazon presents the monitoring system as humanizing the interaction transportation companies have with their drivers to enhance driving performance. Indeed, what matters in this humanization is to enable artificial intelligence systems to better understand, or rather better act as if they understood, the humans in their interactions with their environment. Of course, what matters to Amazon is not at all understanding or legibility of each individual employee, their motivations, their intentions, or the singularity of their experiences. In fact, individual warehouse workers are eminently substitutable or replaceable anyway. It is not their singularity that Amazon has an interest in. Nor is Amazon primarily interested in acquiring knowledge about the productivity of the workforce in general, but rather it's interested in rendering individual workers' every move computable in a data behaviorist paradigm. This is the kind of data behaviorism allowing humanization of interactions contemplated by Amazon. To humanize in this discourse means to scale power down to the molecular level, to leverage particularities, not singularities, but particularities. Conveniently, from the perspective of a neoliberal management, these particularities escape both subjective identification, recognition, and collective perception and discussion. It is, of course, as I said, not the singularity of individual experiences that are of interest to Amazon, nor the regularities observed in the workforce population, but rather the mostly subliminal particularities of behavioral responses to environmental stimuli. The individual and collective, trade unionist and so on, subjects would how they may or may not acknowledge experience as their own and so on do not matter at all. They disappear from power's gaze. Singular and collective experiences drastically fall in value, and power operates on the mode of machinic enslavement rather than social subjection. So, enabling everything to be connected, to communicate or synchronize with everything else in almost real time, the computational turn appears to disqualify all kinds of representations, including predictions based on statistical representations, which never pretend to be adequate to the world, but merely to provide approximative representations of it with an objective of neutrality. All these, even statistical representations, are felt as archaisms in favor of a post-representational recursive paradigm of disintermediated access to the digital real in high resolution, which is also a high dissolution, at a pre-semiotic stage emancipated from the symbolic order, from the tyranny of the signifier, from the imperialism of language itself. So, and I will end maybe my attempt to not define algorithmic governmentality by this. I would say that the aim, but I will maybe later further explain this, the aim is not so much to manage or influence the individuals and groups, but to render power absolutely agile, capable of leveraging the contingency of individual and collective behaviors, whereas data-drivenness attests to the replacement of both the commodity form and currency by assets. All that matters is the convertibility of contingent data into speculative assets. So the hallmark of power in algorithmic regime is not so much that it would look at us, spy on us, but rather that it literally bypasses the visual episteme, the phenomenological perceptual systems of recognition, of qualification, of judgment, of categories in favor of systems of recursive computation. As a consequence, algorithmic governmentality is quite indifferent to what is present, to what appears consistent and real to our ordinary senses, as it shifts towards the forward-looking detection of contingent patterns as novel, latent speculative spaces, which are in no way subjectively or collectively recognizable. So, yes, I don't know if this fits as a broad indication of what algorithmic governmentality is about as a problem.
Yes. Well, let me jump in. I would be interested at this point in two things. One would be that in one of your texts at some point you coming from this critique of algorithmic governmentality, you continue to argue for a quote-unquote return to reality. So I would be interested actually what you mean by reality in this case. So what is it coming from this critique that you try to bring forward maybe as a, I don't know how to call it then, counter-ontology, or I don't know. Maybe you could state what you mean with reality in this case.
Yes.
This is one of the questions that I have. And the other one would be that when reading the texts, from time to time, I was asking myself whether or not these descriptions that you give of algorithmic governmentality, I got the impression that they do absolutely fit for some form of imaginary of algorithmic governing, but that if we look at the actual practice that this is not really an adequate description of how things are really going down. And one example for this would be this phrase of raw data is an oxymoron. And you yourself state that the people who are actually working with these technologies are very much aware that there are so many hands reaching into the algorithm, that there is always a co-production between the algorithm and the humans who are working with it, so that there is not actually this place of perfection that you kind of describe when talking about algorithmic governmentality, who seems to be omnipotent when hearing about the critique. And of course, it's powerful, but it's not omnipotent. And it didn't yet succeed in getting rid of the human, I would say. So there is already this aspect of interpretation. There's already this aspect of entanglement. There's already this aspect of human co-production always in place already in capitalist cybernetics as well.
Yes, of course, I hear what you say, but I think that that's maybe the most difficult thing to transmit. In fact, what I say, what I speak about, and I speak about it in my text as well. It's a technical ideology. It's a technical ideology of big data. It means that what I speak about is a kind of pretension, but a pretension that even, the designers of the technology, data scientists and so on, they are not naive realists. They know that, in fact, big data doesn't mean exhaustivity, that automatization or algorithm doesn't mean objectivity, that non-selectivity or less obvious selectivity doesn't mean impartiality, and so on. I think, in fact, and that's the reason also why I refer to problematization. The basic question I ask to myself first is why is the turning to algorithm and ambient intelligence, artificial intelligence, big data, and so on? Why are these solutions presented as solutions without and appearing as something absolutely obvious, whereas they're presented as solutions, but the kind of problem to which they are presented as a solution, against which they are presented as solutions, is never clearly stated. And my perception is that it is precisely because in our society, we have a hatred for averages. We all want to be unique and recognized as unique. We don't want to be part of a category anymore. We all want personalization and so on. It means that, in fact, there is a radical crisis of representation. And by this, I mean not only the perception that all kinds of representations through which we perceive the world is misleading, is ideological, is politically suspect, and so on. It's not that. I think that there is behind this success of the algorithmic turn, there is a kind of mystic of immanence, a mystic or a belief that it would be possible at last to touch rationally on the world and the things in themselves. It is very close to the speculative turn and speculative realism in philosophy. That's the reason why I'm writing also about algorithmic realism. But it's of course absolutely ideological. Of course, the human is everywhere. The human is in the it's the human who designs or who inscribes the objective function. The objective function of the algorithm. What is it? It's the indication of or the cost function, it indicates what has to be maximized, what has to be minimized, what has to be optimized. Of course, that objective function is nothing but the formalization of the sectorial interest or the sectorial logic of the actor who's using the algorithm. So there is the human there. There is the human, of course, in social reality itself, and the mere transcription of social reality, of social into digital data, which appear as facts. I speak of a new kind of facticity. The simple transformation of reality, of that reality, social reality, complex and so on, into data, doesn't purge, doesn't expurgate that reality from all the domination, the reports of domination, relation over dominations, and so on. In fact, as you say, data, raw data don't exist. It's not only that raw data is always cooked. Of course, it is. It's a patient work of desindexation, anonymization, and so on. Producing raw data is a hard work, but it's not only that. It's also that producing raw data is organizing the amnesia of data with regard to the condition of their production. That's the reason why I say it's ideological. It hides its own conditions of production. So it's not that in the question you sent me, I read that I don't only criticize the concept of a truth founded in probability. I never criticize the concept of a truth founded in probability, because following Foucault, for me, truth, the notion of truth, is always the result of truth regimes. Truth is always produced. It's something that is added to the world. It's nothing that you can find in the world. And that's also, the false promise of big data, or the idea of the ideology, of the technical ideology of big data, is the idea that knowledge shouldn't have to be produced anymore, that it can be discovered in the data, that it's always already immanent in the data, and provided you use the right algorithm, you will find, or knowledge will, or truth will arise spontaneously. That's exactly that kind of naive realism that I'm combating as strongly as I can. And you find that same kind of naive realism in a lot of technocritics who really work on the idea of rendering algorithms fair, accountable, transparent, and so on, meaning that they want to correct the algorithms with the idea that if algorithms are fair, are just, are accountable, and so on, then we will have a perfect access, an objective access to what is. Without human intermediation. That's really mad. That's the madness, because I think, first of all, there are several reasons, of course. The first obvious reason is that the notion of notions such as justice, or concepts such as justice, fairness, and so on, are dialectical concepts. Dialectical concepts are not easily formalizable into what Nicolas Georgescu-Roegen call arithmomorphic concepts. Arithmomorphic concepts, in Georgescu-Roegen's theorization, are concepts which are exactly what, the result of an optimization, of an algorithmic optimization is, just one result, yes or not. That's algorithm. That's sure, you don't have to discuss. But justice is not something like that. It's really dialectical. It means that it is a concept which is distinct, of course, but not discretizable, and that's hugely important. Maybe I can. Yes, I will read you. I had that passage of Georges Courregain. For Georges Courregain, the arithmomorphic character of a concept is linked to the fact that there is a definitive, discrete border between what is and what is not, what it is not. What it is and what it is not. The possibility of defining a univocal relation between a set of concepts and a numerical scale makes it possible, for example, to attest to the arithmomorphic character of the concept in this set. But there are another world of concepts, which are all the concepts that we humans use as we are, because we are not inhuman, and those not inhuman concepts are all dialectical, I think. So for reality, I think it was a misunderstanding. There was a misunderstanding there. The reality, I don't remember having written that, but if I argue for a return to reality, the kind of reality I would like to return to is the reality that is added to the world, added by our own collective productions of meaning. So that's the dialectical reality I would argue for. There are a series of conditions for this kind of additional reality to occur, and the first conditions are spatial and temporal. We need scenes to discuss about dialectical concepts, but maybe I go too far in my answers. I don't know if it fits what you had in mind.
Well, if it was merely a misunderstanding, you think, then we could continue to other questions. And I would just maybe to clear something up, and since we are here in a workshop on cybernetic politics, I just wanted to ask if I maybe understood it wrong right now in your answer when you pointed towards a kind of naive realism, which is kind of close to speculative realism, which you say is an kind of this naive realism is an aspect of algorithmic governmentality as well as of some of the critics. I'm actually wondering, because I always thought that cybernetics actually does not really care about ontology in this sense, but is absolutely fine with something that would be called a probable truth. So it's not about really kind of trying to unveil some kind of essence. I always thought that this is absolutely not a logic found within the cybernetic paradigm, but as I said, instead it would totally be fine with a version that simply works or works better than the other one. So this is what I meant with a truth founded in probability. And I would say that this is really a fundamental difference. So I was wondering if you think that algorithmic governmentality is in this respect different from cybernetics, or why you say that they are trying to kind of get to the real, because I always thought it's not about that.
No, indeed, it's not about that. I think we have to understand quite clearly the epistemic ambition or strategic ambitions behind these machines as when they are used in a capitalist context, of course. In fact, with the advent of big data and machine learning, emergences are detected in real time in an anomic, complex, and purely metric digital space, which is the result of an abstraction, but also of all kinds of production of raw data, as you said, which is compression and so on. But which is purely metric, which is a space which is envisaged not from the topological angle of continuity and stability, but from the time-based angle of contingency, instability, and continuously reconducted crisis, as Jose Exo Adams explained in one of his papers. So in that context, what we have to understand is that data don't function as signs. They don't function as signifiers for something. Rather, they function as pure differences or deferments of meaning that are never given in their completion. So to explain that a little bit, I have to, I think, go back to a comparison between what, for example, Adolf Kettler between the deterministic metaphysics that, for example, Adolf Kettler had when founding or participating to the foundation of statistics, and what happens in machine learning. The speculative ambitions of machine learning, I think, are really at odds with the mid-19th century of ambitions of studying social physics, like Adolf Kettler, whose project was to study man in his various degrees of aggregation from the individual state to the highest state of combination, which includes the whole of humanity. On the contrary, algorithmic governmentality radically embraces uncertainty, incommensurability, contingency. It also attests to a new mode of preemptive intervention, which is no longer legitimated or justified as the ability to act on the basis of precise knowledge of the future, but on the contrary, as an invincible certainty as to what must be done in the absence of such certainty, as Martijn Konings says quite clearly in Capital and Time. So, and the temporality is, of course, recursive, which changed everything. So, in fact, it's a dynamic mode where continuous learning and production of reliabilities without truth, including truth about people's behaviors, replace the production of temporary truth and their justifiability, verifiability, contestability. I would say what relates algorithmic governmentality also to cybernetic is, of course, the overcoming of the notion that of the separation of calculation and things, of contents and matter, and so on. It resets a new ontology, but which is completely disarticulated from the notion of a human subject. So I don't know if it responds to your question.
I'm sure it does somehow, definitely. I would be interested, because I think you have described a lot of your critique already. I would be interested in what you argue for, actually. So I would be interested in what is your proposition? What would you bring in against algorithmic governmentality?
Well, I think, of course, my posture here is more descriptive of something which amounts to capitalism capitalism and neoliberalism on algorithmic steroids. I know it's not fashionable to say that, but I think we would need maybe a constitutional moment, a moment wherein we think about what is a constitution. A constitution is a text by which the people who are present and who sign the constitution limit their own power. They limit their own power. They promise, a little bit like, Nietzsche charged nature with that task of producing an animal who can promise and keep its promise. Constitution does that. In fact, it forces those who sign to consider a lot of things which are irreducible to the mere optimization of the current situation or the state of facts. It allows for the consideration, a political constitution, allow for the consideration of those who have not yet left any digital trace that can be enrolled in the calculation of the optimal. It means that it allows to preserve a space and time which would not be preoccupied by the bulimic appetites, by those who have been granted, including by algorithmic systems, granted with the force without law, which allows them to transform the virtual, the not yet there, the possibilities into surplus value. So I think we have to find ways to enforce a new intelligence of limits, because this intelligence of limits, which life itself has very well, as Canguilhem has shown us, that normativity of life itself, but we have to find that there are several kinds of, because I'm a lawyer so maybe I'm a bit distorted as all lawyers, but I'm distorted, and I try to go back to my own discipline, as a safe island. But we have instruments, the Constitution. We have the notion of institution. What is an institution? It's all that algorithmic governmentality tries to render obsolete, in fact. The notion of, according to David Hume, the role of institutions is, in fact, to force the agents, you, me, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, everyone, to force people to transcend the partiality of their natural sympathies. David Hume was not for the social contract because, among other reasons, he thought the problem of our society, of society, is not the egoism of individuals. In fact, people are not egoistic because they can sacrifice themselves for the ones they care for their children and so on. The problem is the partiality of these natural sympathies, and only institutions can force people to refrain from their impulsion or compulsion to optimize, that is, to take the most they can of the present and of the future and of everything that is there. Only institution can force them to consider what is not already there for them to consume, in fact. So we need that. We need that. No, we need to rethink the role of institutions, but fast, because we don't have much time, in front of systems, in fact, that push everyone towards self-optimization and consumption of everything. That's what I said at the beginning. Algorithmic governmentality is a way of fragmenting all collectives, immunizing, I would say, capitalism against all and every form that should and would, in fact, interrupt its flaws. That is, the world, the material world, and its limits, the social, the collective. It fragments the collective. It's a high resolution, which is also a high dissolution, and life itself. In fact, life itself with its own neganthropic regulations. That I really believe that Nick Land was right when he said that there is a common teleology between cybernetics and capitalism, and that terrible teleology is really necropolitic, I believe. So that's the reason why we urgently need to reconcile with the notion that anyway, we have to invent the forms, including the political forms, the institutional forms, the constitutional forms, which institute our life in common. And Alain Supiot had it right when he said the anthropologic function of law is to articulate together the different facets of human being, these facets being the physiological, the symbolic, and the social. If we agree to translate or to consider that all these different facets or layers are transcribable or reducible to pure flows of digital computable data, and that this is enough for us to govern ourselves, I think we do a big mistake.
I think I would have to kind of dig a little deeper into this answer, because I guess it's not as simple as simply reverting back to like the law as it was, the sovereign as it was, the individual as it was. So if we want to find answers to this, as you frame it, kind of assault of algorithmic governmentality, then first of all, we would have to ask, are they the proper tools in terms of are they adequate for the task? And then, of course, I think we would have to rethink them, because, I mean, they are not innocent in themselves. The law is not innocent. The liberal subject for sure is not innocent, and so on. So I would like to know, at some point, maybe this would be a good example. At some point, you state that you think that actually we would have to stick with the fictional individual because it's kind of operationable, or it serves a purpose, and that we need this purpose, and while knowing that it is a fiction, we still need it. And I was wondering how far you would go with these things, because I think it's kind of a play with fire, but maybe positively speaking, it's staying with the trouble in terms of done a hero way. But I would be interested whether or not we would have to kind of rethink these elements that you bring forward against algorithmic governmentality.
Yes, I think my response will be much simpler than your answer, I'm afraid. But I must state what's a subject for me. What's the form subject for me? The form subject is, the content is void. Subjects are processes in constant overcoming of themselves. Subjects are becomings. They are processes of individuation, processes of subjectivation, and so on. So the notion of subject is eminently dynamic. So I'm not nostalgic at all of the subject conceived as the liberalism conceived it as its fundamental unitary, master of its own intentionality, separated from others, and so on. Not at all. My notion of the subject is completely different, and I have come to consider that the role that the subject plays, the subject is a point of view. It's nothing else than a point of view. So the world needs the subject, because the subject is the point of view from which objects may appear, despite their ontological indetermination, as Barad and so on would say. And at the same time, subjects need objects, because also objects reflect their own position. So it's really a notion of the subject as both as power, subject as power of individuation, or as potentiality of individuation, as never completely enclosed in any present, but as a process that is lived and experienced and constructed and deconstructed all the time, always over time. So my notion of the subject is a heterochronic notion. It's absolutely heterochronic. That's the reason why the absorption in the pure vortex of real time of everything by algorithmic governmentality is absolutely inhuman. It's not habitable, because we are over time. So that notion of the subject, I take the subject like an actor. Maybe it's because I'm a lawyer. The notion of person is the mask. It's a mask that people put on their face when they have to act on a stage, but also on the stage of a judicial court, for example. The person is inseparable from all the kinds of editorializations that we perform all the time. But we are nothing else. We are nothing else than these editorializations. There is no subject without a form. The form is the subject. So that's the reason why the legal subject, for example, is a functional fiction. It's something that the law needs, but the law knows that it's a fiction. It's a place, it's a location from which to make one's situation or the situation of the people who share an existential experience of discrimination, for example, together. Being a person before the law is being able to give account of injustice, felt problems. In fact, it's a way of mattering and of determining or contributing to the definition of what matters, what's a problem, and what needs solution. So it's quite pragmatic, I would say, but not only. It's not only pragmatic, I think it's also in a way ontologic, but it's an ontology which is absolutely non-essentialist.
Before asking my last question, I would love to go to a place where we have been today in this workshop already. I'm very much interested in this question of alternative arts of government. And there's this famous quote by Foucault, which I read out today earlier already. And the quote goes, "What governmentality is possible as a strictly, intrinsically and autonomously socialist governmentality? In any case, we know only that if there is a really socialist governmentality, then it is not hidden within socialism and its texts. It cannot be deduced from them. It must be invented." End quote. And as I understand it, your critique is a critique of algorithmic governmentality as a techno-capitalist governmentality, and not all of it will necessarily apply for other uses of these technologies in other contexts. So maybe let's turn to the question of construction again, to the question of alternative in a positive sense. What could this invention of desirable alternative governmentalities look like?
Well, I completely rejoined you when saying that, and that's the virtue of problematization is to avoid technological determinism. Or, today technologies are the ideal, scapegoat. All the problems are, we project all our problems on technology. It's because of social networks that democracy is dysfunctional. It's because of no, it's much broader than that, of course. So I think there's no fatality in the fact that these technologies today are used in order to boost capitalism and to accelerate towards apocalypse. By apocalypse, I mean precisely not the end of the world, but the end of capitalism. In fact, the smartness of these technologies is precisely that through big data and machine learning, we can become aware, we can see regularities of the world which are only observable on huge numbers. So it's a question of scale. So in fact, what they produce, also what they can produce, are alternative maps of the world and of events, which can be very interesting. I give you an example. There are a lot of discussions today about the possibility, the legitimacy, or the opportunity of using algorithmic systems in the judicial system, algorithmic decision making as to help judges, for example, and so on, to take decisions. In fact, what is interesting is that big data analytics allow, for example, to give to the judges a mirror of how the law functions. It can give very precious informations about the state of the law as it is practiced, what kind of decisions are taken, and so on. So we can look at ourselves in big data, and it gives us an image, a certain image, which is not deprived of a point of view, because algorithms have point of view. The point of view of an algorithm, I would say it's objective function. It depends of how the algorithm has been constructed and so on. It depends on what kind of sensors are used to collect the data, what kind of data are considered noise, and what kind of data are considered signals, and so on. So there are a point of view, but it can allow us to be alerted about specificities or singularities of the world that we would not, or of our own behaviors that we would not notice otherwise. So it can increase our intelligence instead of depriving us from intelligence. The risk being, of course, that we overestimate the objectivity, the scientificity of these productions. No, they're not more scientific, not more objective than human judgment. It's just that the world is looked at from a different perspective when looked at from the perspective of an algorithm. We have to know about all the biases of the humans, but the biases of the algorithms as well. And there are a lot, and they are difficult to detect sometimes, because, for example, the distinction between what is a signal and what is noise is not decided by an institution in algorithmic governmentality. It is just it is set. It is that distinction is set in a way which is endogenous to the socio-mediatic reality. So it's evolving all the time. So it's quite difficult to know exactly what the point of view of the algorithm is. And that's the difficulty. But that difficulty is quite interesting in itself, because it instills trouble if we keep attentive to these difficulties. So that's the reason why I don't militate for algorithmic transparency, for example, which is it's a complete stupidity from my perspective. Not only it's unattainable, because the inductive logic is not even easily translatable into linear language understandable by the humans, but it would be really attenuating the enchanting alien logic, or the enchanting view from somewhere else, which we really need in order to boost our imagination also. So I think it can, if algorithmic systems can de-automatize our own thinking, that would be quite great.
Okay, in order to have some time for open discussion, I will ask my last question, which is always, if you think about the future, what makes you joyful?
That's maybe the hardest one for the moment. If I think about the future, what makes me joyful, I think maybe, but I'm not the first one to say that, that impression that the apocalypse has already arisen, and that we are what remains. I think Slavoj Zizek said that, and I find that a nice logic, because, you know, if you think that the absolute catastrophe has already arisen, which is not impossible, in fact, then we have nothing left to lose, you know, except that we now have to organize ourselves to become human, to stop behaving like inhuman persons. And there is much work, I think, to attain to that non-inhumanity. I prefer to speak of non-inhuman because it's less segregative than affirming a human essence. But I really like that double negation. I think that double negations are really interesting and really dialectical, and they are maybe the core of what makes us human. That ability, it's also Zizek who said that, and I agree with him. What an artificial intelligence will never understand is the difference between coffee without cream and coffee without milk. But we understand there is a difference because we are affected differently by the lack of cream or the lack of milk, depending of our tastes. So that's what we have to preserve, I think, and that's dialectic. That's dialectics, and I think, that's one thing that makes me happy. Another thing that makes me happy, or even joyful, are of course my kids, whom I find so intelligent and so marvelous. And yes, that's it, I guess.
Okay, Antoinette, thank you so much for being part of Future Histories.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and your attention.
That was our show for today. Thanks a lot for listening. If you want to support Future Histories, you can do so on Patreon. For this, visit patreon.com/futurehistories, or you can simply tell a friend that you liked the show and that he, she, or they might like it as well. Thanks a lot, and hear you in 2 weeks.